Alright, greetings to you. Very good on being on time, and I can see that we have everyone here. Let's not waste any time, as we have a lot of material to cover. Let's get down to business right away. So, as far as I know, you came across a rather difficult situation in your company, right? Yes. And before we talk about how to deal with it, I want to give you a rather large amount of basic, fundamental data about money. You don't mind? Then onward. So, as far as I know, a person sometimes makes mistakes in dealing with money. I hope, or to be more precise, I am sure you're no exception. You borrow money from the wrong person at some point, or you lend it to the wrong person, or you don't borrow enough, you spend money not as you ought to, and so on. Is that right? Yes. Alright. So, here we can conclude that it's possible that a person who makes mistakes in dealing with money doesn't have the technology of how to do it correctly. Logical, isn't it? That's right, exactly. Now look, if one knows the tech of how to do something and can do it and uses it, he cannot be the adverse effect of it. L. Ron Hubbard. What does that quote mean? Have you ever opened up a can of food? Yes. And has it ever happened that you cut yourself? It's happened. Exactly. Usually, that's happened to everyone. Alright, so could we say that at that time you didn't have the technology of opening a can mastered? Well, we could say that. Right. And the can affected you adversely. The same goes for money. If a person deals with money improperly, then money can now affect him in an adverse way. If you had the technology, the right technology of managing money, then I hope that you probably wouldn't have gotten in the predicament that your company got into. Isn't that logical? It is. It is. There is a colossal number of all sorts of possible data in our society regarding money. And very often in this sea of data, there are a lot of false and incorrect and controversial data. There are a lot of various terms in this subject that are differently explained in this manner or that, and one source says this about them and another says quite something else, and so on. Well, for example, if I ask you what profit is, one of you will say, for example, Dasha will say that it is this, and Nina will say that. Nikita will say it's this way, and Vova will say it's that way. But look, there are always going to be different concepts as far as the nuances of what it is. Why am I telling you this? Because there is a whole lot of terminology in the subject of finances. But the things we use we're going to clear carefully before we use them. Agreed? Yes. Because we want to be talking the same language, alright? What is financial planning? What does financial planning actually consist of? It's not what you think it is based on various ideas we have from the past. Here's a definition on this fundamental concept for you. Financial planning means how to handle the money and assets of an org so as to maintain outgo below income. L. Ron Hubbard. Pay attention here, because the key thing in this definition is that it's a certain method, how-to, some sort of technology on how to go about keeping the income above the outgo. What is money actually? Very often, money causes varying and, I would say, inappropriate emotions. Every time someone sees money, you could say something turns on inside him and he starts acting inappropriately. Of course, that's not everyone, but very often you can observe this. Is that the way it is in your company? Yes. That happens quite often, and that's not surprising. Throughout the ages, people have had various incidents, you could say, having to do with money. Someone died a pauper in the gutter because he didn't have money. Someone else was killed because he had a lot of money. So when the question arises, is money good or bad? That's always the question, you know. A lot is probably dangerous. Too little is also not good. And then based on these totally unpleasant to us, decisions we very often react incorrectly or inappropriately to money. So, what is money, actually? Basically, money is an idea backed by confidence. L. Ron Hubbard. Money is confidence. You're consumers. You go to stores, you pay your bills, your suppliers, etc. Tell me this. You're only going to give up your money if you're sure that in exchange for this money, you're going to get what you need. Simple, right? Yes. There was a time when there wasn't money at all. There was none. Someone grew potatoes, someone else raised rabbits or deer. By the way, here's an interesting thing, that the etymology, the origin of the word, bucks, now generally used the whole world over, basically this word derives from this. When our Indians, the ones in America, raised deer or bucks, they dressed hide. They came to the whites and they traded these dressed hides for firewater or, I don't know, for some other articles they wanted. And since that time, these buck hides with the letter S, that's the plural, you know, and that's how we have this word bucks. And since those times, these bucks were the currency basically, the money, the means of exchange. Today, we have green papers called bucks, and that's money. But it's only paper. But if I show you two papers, a regular one and a green one, you're going to choose the green one. The green one, but why? You trust in that paper. You know that it has some buying power. Alright, that's a small excursion into the past in regards to these basic concepts. Let's go on and talk about terminology. First of all, let's clear the word solvency. Solvency consists only on income greater than outgo and making enough money. This is measured by the organization's cash bills ration, and its method of calculation is of value in building a prosperous organization. L. Ron Hubbard. We had a very important definition here, which is solvency. That's when there is enough money earned. When there is enough, earning money at that level allows us to keep the income above the outgo. There is another term, a ratio we had there, cash bill. In this case, cash doesn't mean cash as such, you see. It means cash as far as how much money does your company have. And then you have a certain amount of bills that you owe. And basically, the ratio between these two quantities shows in essence how solvent you are as a company. That's not difficult, is it? Let's take a look at a small graph. Look here. That's one graph, and that's our cash. Take a look. It's growing, for example. And here's the second graph. These are bills. And it's also growing. But as you see, it's growing proportionally to the first graph. Tell me, is that a good graph? No. Why not? Because at the bottom we had a certain amount of work. And then some time goes by, and at that final point we have a lot more work, many times over. But there is hardly any use from that work. You know, there is a phrase that goes like this: no dough, but keeping busy. If these two graphs were growing apart, well, of course, as the company expands, the bills will also grow. But the rate of cash increase should be higher than the rate of bills increase. And then, if the difference between these two is constantly increasing, then that's a good place to be.